It is March 17th, 2022, and this is the California High-Speed Rail Authority's Board of Directors meeting. Welcome, everyone, on behalf or from the members of the board. Thank you for joining us. Today's meeting will start momentarily, but first we'll call the meeting to order. Mr. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Schenk.
Here.
Chair Richards.
Here.
Director Camacho.
Here.
Vice Chair Miller. Assembly Member Rambula. Director Preya.
Here.
Director Gilmetti.
Present.
Director Scutia.
Here.
Director Williams.
Here.
Director Pena.
Here.
Senator Gonzalez. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mo. And if we'll bring the flag up, we'll have the pledge to allegiance, please. With me, colleagues, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
and to the republic
to the republic
For
which
which
it
it
stands,
which it stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty.
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. That's a pretty fancy outfit you've got on there, Director Williams.
Oh, let's see the outfit.
You are.
You know, I'm trying to stay warm in this crazy weirdness of, sort of a, I don't know,
It's very
spring,
cool.
spring showers.
Yeah, I
There
love
we
it.
Wearing of the green there.
Yeah.
You're looking good, Anthony.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do before we start the agenda is let everyone in the public know that for those of you who wish to address us today, there's going to be two public comment sessions. The one that will immediately follow these comments that I'm making will be on all items except for item number 2. Item number 2 is the 2022 business plan update. After the public comment session, we'll go to for the first one, we'll go into our agenda. When we get to item number 2, CEO Kelly will give us an update on the 2022 business plan, after which all of you who wish to comment on the business plan, we will then have another public comment period for you to do so. So again, on the first public comment period, anything you'd like to address the board about except for item number 2, the business plan. With that, we'll move into our agenda. Item number 1 is the approval for the minutes for the February 17th, 2022 meeting. Are there any questions or comments or any changes on the requested changes for the February meeting? If we have none, do we have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Director Camacho and Director Schenk, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any objections? Passed unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move into, I'm going to back up on you, Mo. We'll now do the first public comment session. So please, if you'd advise the people who'd like to speak to us how they do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, all. Welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Board of Directors public meeting. Today, we are hosting this meeting remotely via Zoom. In a moment, we will begin to take public comment. Please note, if you wish to provide public comment on agenda item 2, an opportunity for public comment on that specific agenda item will be offered after it has been presented to the board and the public. If you wish to provide public comment on all other items, please listen to these instructions. To go over some important technical aspects of this meeting for offering your public comment. If you are logged into this meeting via the Zoom application, please use the raise your hand feature typically located at the bottom of your screen so that I may call on you to provide your comment. If you're dialing in by phone, pressing #2 will raise your hand and put you into our queue. Speakers will be called in the order that their hand is raised. Once you've been in the queue and your name is called, in the web meeting, please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. On the phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you'll hear a message that you are being unmuted. Once unmuted, it'll be your turn to speak. Please slowly and clearly say and spell your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you represent. After your introduction, each speaker is allotted 2 minutes to provide their comment. I will interject at 1 minute and 45 seconds to provide a 15-second warning. Our court reporter is on the line to record these comments. If they need you to spell or repeat something, they may interject. I will notify you when your time is nearly up. At the end of your comment, we will disable your microphone. However, you're welcome to stay on the line to continue watching or listening to the meeting. If you do not wish to provide comment and simply want to watch the meeting, you can do so by logging on to hsr.ca.gov and looking for the link to our live stream. Mr. Chairman, first up for public comment, we have David Schwagel. David Schwagel.
Good morning, Mr. Swagel, and welcome. Mr. Swagel,
Okay, am I unmuted now?
you are, and welcome. Please go
Thank
ahead.
you so much. David, D-A-V-I-D, Schwagel, S-C-H-W-E-G-E-L, spelled like Schwegel, rhymes with bagel. I'm with Phelps, P-H-E-L-P-S, Engineering Services, spelled just like Michael Phelps, in Talkspace Therapy for All. I'm in Reno, Nevada, and honestly, I'm kind of feeling like I need some therapy myself because I am stressing out about renewing my Washington State civil engineering license. Washington State is a state with very high standards of professional conduct. And I'm stressed out for 2 reasons. Number one, your PCM consultant on construction package 2.3, Arcadis, made me sign an agreement not to sue statement after they violated California Labor Code Section 970B on fraudulent induction in order to get my severance package, which according to Washington State engineering law is a bribe. And they have a no tolerance policy for bribery in the state of Washington for their engineers. Second, I paid membership dues to both the Registered Traffic Engineers of America, who is focused on elevating traffic engineering registration in California from title protection to regulated practice. And then I paid membership dues to the American Society of Civil Engineers, Region 9, the California region. And unbeknownst to me, I found out the ASCE Region 9 opposed elevating traffic engineering registration in California from title protection to regulated practice. So that, according to
15 seconds remaining,
law, is a conflict of interest. My call to action for you is this: please, let's step it up and make sure that we hold our consultants and professional associations' feet to the fire to abide by the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swagel.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, we have first name James. First name James.
James, this is, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Hello and good morning. My name is James Eichenbaum, Jameschenbaum. I know it's a mouthful. And I'm unaffiliated with any organization. I'd like to thank the board of directors, the CEO, and all of the other administrators, staff, and workers involved in the mega project. I'm from Gilroy, California, and like many other young members of the community there and across the state, the high-speed rail gives me hope for a future in a sustainable, equitable, and freer California. The EIS for San Jose to Merced was released a little less than a month ago. Since it will greatly affect my community, which I love so much, I'm moved to strongly encourage the board to carefully consider the options for moving forward with this project. I believe that when you do so, you'll agree with me and many of my community members that Route Alternative 3 has too many environmental costs and outweigh any benefits. And I strongly support you moving forward with alternatives 1 or 4, with 4 being identified as the preferred alternative by the authority. Gilroy needs high-speed rail downtown. And I believe that full grade separation offered by alternative 1 would, in my view, offer the best speed, reliability, and integration with traffic, and most importantly, safety. Recently, we saw a passenger locomotive from a different transit authority in the Bay Area crashed into construction material on an at-grade track, and no one was hurt, but accidents do happen, and I would be devastated if such an event occurred in my community in Gilroy. Please take this into consideration for your final decision next month. Full speed ahead. Thank you. That is all.
Thank you, Mr. Eichelbaum.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, we have Laura Uden. Laura Uden.
Good morning, Ms. Uden.
Good morning. Thank you. Laurauden. I represent NSI Engineering, but also a lot of small businesses on the Business Advisory Council. I want to talk briefly about the conflict of interest policy again. I've been working on my own determination.
What happened?
We've lost your Mo.
It
Sorry,
looks like
I got unmuted there. Can we figure out how to stop my time and start me again?
Yeah, we're going to go back to 2 minutes, Laura, so you can start over.
Thank you. So I've been working on this project on the conflict of interest for 5 weeks. And they replied, HSR Legal replied right away, but it's sorting out the mitigations and our work scope that's taking the time. I've had multiple meetings, emails, and letters back and forth. I just want you to know it's not a quick process. While it might be possible for some primes and environmental subs to not be possible for primes and certain environmental subs to be on both PDS and other types of high-speed rail contracts, there are many situations where small subs should be allowed to be on both without a conflict of interest. For example, on a regional consultant contract, there are firms that have little to no input to the environmental documents and also no decision-making authority. Document control, project controls like scheduling, invoicing, public outreach, small business utilization, and scope that's focused on meeting authority requirements like configuration, risk, and quality management, which is what we do. So the main issues of potential conflict are preparing the EIR, EIS, which, as I said, we don't do, overseeing your own work, and we put forward a mitigation that says we would organize the team so we don't oversee our own projects, and access to sensitive information, in which case we would set up a firewall to avoid sharing of sensitive information between those of us working on PDS and those of us working on other things. The mitigations offered by the authority were if you're on an existing contract, you have to leave it before you can confirm participation on a team for the PDS pursuit. Or if you're not on an existing contract, only pursue PDS and nothing else. The problem with these for small businesses is in the first case, if you have to leave an existing contract to get on a potential contract, not only is that a bird in the hand worth two in the bush, but it's also potentially December before we would get paid on PDS, and we can't go that long without income. We also can't pursue only one contract at the expense of pursuing nothing else. My request is to please work with the small firms to identify what their actual scope is and mitigations that won't put them out of business. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Uden.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, we have Blair Beekman. Blair Beekman.
Mr. Beekman, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Blair Beekman here, Beekman is my last name. Thanks for the meeting today. This is one of my first times talking at the regular CHSR meeting. I've been speaking at the morning finance meeting. And now I'm trying to speak at the regular public comment time. Thank you. As what I've tried to say at the financial meetings, I'm a beginner to this process, and in my beginnerness, I'm interested in what was the beginning ideas of CHSR, and that was a route from LA to Sacramento. And it's my feeling that if you practice those ideals, that I think that can necessitate and create a sense of how to work the entire program better, in my beginner's understanding of things. And for instance, the Merced, I think a Merced through Tracy to Sacramento line is an interesting idea that can reflect on the Bay Area and how the future of high-speed rail can be a process with as minimal disturbances of people's homes as possible. And I think the Merced to Tracy Sacramento line is the way to go about that. And that has an important effect how CHSR can go into the San Francisco Bay Area. And it's not just San Jose that we need to be concerned about. It's also, the East Bay, Dublin and through Pleasanton area and Livermore. And I think the Tri-Valley Railroad system can be questionable. I think we
15
can
seconds remaining.
I think you can possibly use BART, a new extension of BART into the Central Valley and from Antioch into Sacramento possibly. It's those ideas that make everything available for the future of the Bay Area. Good luck. in
Over
that
the
process.
2-minute time limit.
Thank you. And I would only say to Mr. Beekman and for all of you out there, I strongly encourage you in terms of your research on this project, please go to our website and you'll find a tremendous amount of information, both relevant historically as well as currently. So thank you again, Mr. Beekman. Go ahead, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to briefly go over the instructions again. For members of the public who wish to provide comment on all agenda items excluding agenda item 2, please listen to these instructions. If you are logged into this meeting via the Zoom application, please utilize the raise your hand feature typically located at the bottom of your screen so that I may call on you to provide your comment. If you're dialing in by phone, pressing #2 will raise your hand and put you into our queue. Speakers will be called in the order that their hand is raised. Once you've been in the queue and your name is called in the web meeting, please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. On the phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you'll hear a message that you are being unmuted. Mr. Chairman, none of the attendees have motioned to raise their hands to offer public comment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. With that, we will close the first section of public comment today. And we will now move on to agenda item number 2, which is a status of the draft 2022 business plan. And for that, CEO Brian Kelly. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody.
Mhm. And to you.
And to you too.
Thank you very much. Big day.
Mr. O'Kelly.
I am pleased to offer today a summary of the 2022 draft business plan, including an update as to where we are in the plan and an outline of what's in this plan, and then look forward to the public comment period, which will immediately follow my presentation. So as I get into this, let me just start by saying, reminding members that our last business plan, our 2020 business plan, because of the COVID pandemic, was adopted and presented to the legislature just 10 months ago. We were pushed back an entire year during the COVID process. And this draft plan is therefore a bit of a bridge document for us. It addresses three key issues, provides updates on the meaningful project progress that we've had. It outlines new opportunities for this authority and this project with the addition of federal and state funding that is either approved or pending. And it updates the authority's cost estimates reflecting advanced work we've done, and namely that's the completion of the environmental work on 2 Southern California segments and the completion of all scope and schedule determinations on our construction package 4 in the Central Valley. And finally, it reflects the receipt of a new federal grant that we received in November of 2021. So I want to pause here for just a moment, Mr. Chairman, and just ask that I can't see on my screen the PowerPoint presentation, so I want to make sure that's up if it's not up. There we go. Okay. So again, just a reminder for members on a little bit of a housekeeping here. This business plan is required by the Public Utilities Code. We submit one every 2 years, even numbered years under normal circumstances, again, because of COVID. Last year, the 2020 plan was done in 2021. I note that here on this document. Obviously, COVID-19 affected both our timing and our cadence around the document. As we work through this particular 22 business plan, we will have again in less than a year, due to the legislature, our 2023 project update report. So there's a lot of things that we are condensing into a smaller, shorter period of time than we normally do. And because of these things, again, we've looked at the 22 plan as being a bit of a bridge document. It provides updates on progress, opportunities since April of 2021. It includes limited updates to forecast and previews what will be covered in the 2023 project update report. Again, a couple of reasons on why we see this as a bridge document, not just the COVID issue, but also There remains some legislative uncertainty in terms of what the entirety of our scope and resources will be. That's a conversation we're having in the legislature in real time. Those things need to conclude for us to be more clear about certain things. We know our track and systems bids are due to come in July of this year, and that will certainly affect or give us a better understanding of what cost issues remain for the Merced and Bakersfield extensions. We have commercial settlements that we're settling in CPs 1 and 2, 3 right now that we're looking to complete in May of this year. We've worked closely with the State Transportation Agency to update a ridership and revenue model that is used, will be applied to this project, but is also used for estimating ridership on connecting services that we will be part of and affecting both their ridership and ours. And so all of these things we show that it's a good time to update as much as we can right now. There are some things that need to come in over the course of next year, and we will move forward on a more robust project update report in 2023. With that said, I would move to the next slide and just say 2 additional things. There are really 2 elements of our work program that we highlight in this business plan. And the first is, and I'm going to take them up in reverse order here, but the first is the work plan that we intend to do with the estimated budget that we have. And I will get into that a little bit later. But we have an estimate of budget between now and 2030 that is roughly between $22 and $25 billion. And so we have a program that we are moving forward with that falls into that range, and we will talk about that. And then the second part of our work program is what we now can do with new availability of federal funds and the pending state budget appropriation that's part of this budget conversation that the governor included in his budget proposal, which is a $14.9 billion transportation infrastructure plan. So the biggest change really from the 2020 business plan to now is a change in opportunity. And what I mean by that, of course, is there's new federal money in the game, money that should be and could be available for this project, and new money at the state level that as the budget settles, can also determine how quickly we can do certain things. So on the second element, which is both the governor's, the availability of new federal money, and again, in the governor's program, he has pitched in the budget this year, again, the remaining appropriation of our bond funds, the Prop 1A bond funds, $4.2 billion. Our proposal is to use those funds simply to complete construction in the Central Valley. Those bond funds have been reviewed for that purpose and approved for that purpose. And so we think that's the right use of those funds. The governor has proposed $3.75 billion additional for rail and transit projects, including grade separations up and down the state of California in all regions of the state. $750 million for active transportation, which is typically bicycle and pedestrian safety type projects. $1.2 billion for what's called port-related or supply chain projects. In California, we have trade corridors, and we have, importantly, trade corridors of national significance with all of our major ports here. And there's a program that the governor has put out to invest more in those to try to clear up some supply chain issues. And then there's a $400 million program for climate adaptation projects. And again, this is one of the cleanest projects in the nation. And so we think that's relevant for us as well. So that's on the state side. And then on the federal side, if we move to the next slide. This slide should look familiar to the members. We've talked about this before, but this is a snapshot of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act bill that was passed by the Congress at the end of 2021. And it provides over the course of the next 5 years a total of about 70 to 75 billion in funds in 6 competitive pots that we have played in the past. We've been awarded grants out of in the past, and we intend to play in going forward. And some of them are new, like the third one down, the National Infrastructure Project Assistance Program. This is dedicated specifically to mega projects. And then at the top, the Federal State Partnership of Intercity Passenger Rail Program, which is a $12 billion program that is outside now of the Northeast Corridor funding that's available for rail, intercity, high speed, and other passenger rail services systems around the country. And so these are 2 of the mega projects, and then mega project pots, I would say, that we want to compete in. And the others are things like infra grants and raise grants and Chrissy grants, things that are more familiar to members because we've applied for those grants in the past, and we've received a raise grant as recently as November of 2021. But in total, there's again a large amount of money available in these federal pots that provide new opportunity for us. If we go to the next slide, the business plan lays out what the kinds of things we'd like to accomplish with some of this opportunity. One, I know it's of key concern to board member Perea, but we see an opportunity here to go for federal funds where we can take the idea of a single track off the table and pursue funding to make sure that we're delivering a two-track operating alternative immediately in the Central Valley between Merced, Fresno, and Bakersfield. We think there's an opportunity to invest statewide to advance engineering and design work as every project section across the state is environmentally cleared. We have been, a letter was submitted to the administration during the fall where some of the legislative leaders had called for advanced design work to occur in some segments around the state. And again, we think there's an opportunity with federal and state funding to allow us to do that. We want to leverage new federal and state funds for targeted statewide investments, particularly those in shared corridors in the Bay Area and Los Angeles. So these are things like in the Southern California area, there's a series of grade separations that if you do them early, they benefit systems like Metrolink, but they will also be needed for our system when we're operating down there. In the Central Valley, it's something like the Merced station, final location of that, where all three systems will go to one station. So that's a good investment of federal funds. And in the Bay Area, it's something like completing the electrification of the Caltrain project, which is a corridor that, again, in the short term, you would be electrifying what is now a diesel service in the Bay Area. But you finish that, and then that corridor is electrified for what will ultimately be our corridor in the Bay Area. So again, good opportunity to do investments around the state of statewide significance on shared corridors. And then finally, there's a bill pending at the federal level still called the Build Back Better bill. It may move forward under a different moniker, but the idea is that that bill's got a $10 billion program in it specifically for high-speed rail. And so we're going to watch that closely, because if that passes, then I think we can start talking about how we get a funding package to extend to the Bay Area as soon as possible, coupling those dollars with other funds. Next slide. In terms of how we would use our current budget that we have, not counting new federal and state funds, we've estimated our budget between now and 2030 at somewhere between $23 and $25 billion. And the reason there's a range there is because, as members know, our key source of state funding is cap and trade. While that's been stable lately, we'll talk more about that later, but while it's been very stable, there's been moments of volatility in that program, particularly as COVID was taking off. So there is a little range on what the expectation of those would be. But in terms of using our $23 to $25 billion budget, we are recommending the same course of action that we've said before, which is, we want to complete all the environmental work for phase one from Los Angeles and Anaheim all the way to San Francisco. We want to advance our goal to initiate the operating service of electrified service on the 172-mile route in the Central Valley. And we want to complete our funding commitment to the bookend projects in Northern and Southern California. I know the members know what those are, but those are the key things that we want to get done. And again, the reason that what this slide shows, the reason we want to get that operating run going in the Valley is it's got some important attributes for us. It allows the trains to operate at high speeds, 220 miles per hour. We estimate it increases ridership in the region by 4.8 million riders versus a no-build scenario. The revenue increases for the state. This is a subsidized run today, but we see revenue increases of 117.2 million versus what that system brings in now. And we see travel time reductions of between 90 and 100 minutes on that run in the Valley. And so those things, plus the air quality benefits like the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and the reduction in VMT, this is why we want to get an operating run going here. And of course, our goal is to accomplish that within this decade. And so again, that's why we're pushing for this, and we're continue to do so in this business plan. Next slide. We also update some important progress elements in the business plan, and we'll just touch on a couple of those here. The business plan goes into much more detail on these, but Since 2018, we've advanced the design work in the valley from what was roughly about 30% done to now really closing in on 100%, working to get the design changes that address third-party concerns into contracts. 71% of the structures are now in construction or completed. 72% of the miles of guideway is either completed or now in progress. In our Central Valley right-of-way, which has been an historic, difficult issue for the authority, we revised the leadership and the goals and objectives of that division, and we've had pretty good results. We have now 90% of the right-of-way in the Central Valley in hand, and we're ahead of our schedule to complete 95% by the end of the year and be fully done by that in early part of 23. And of course, the environmental clearances, which is a big part of how we're advancing the project for all of phase one. We've cleared 300 miles to date. We'll be coming back to the board with another roughly 90 miles in April. And then again in July, we'll be back for the San Francisco to San Jose run to add, I think it's another 43 miles, on the order of 43 miles in that segment. So that 430 miles will be cleared by the middle of this month, and we'll move to complete the final two in the next year or so. Next slide. Again, just looking at that environmental work for, when I first started here, the only part of this map here that was yellow was, Madera to just Poplar Avenue. And now with the work that the board has done and the team has done by advancing our environmental work, we've cleared all the way to Palmdale in Southern California. We've cleared the stretch between Burbank and LA. And again, by July of this summer of 22, we look to clear into the Bay Area. That's what it looks like to see almost the entirety of the phase one system cleared. And that's what we're working toward. Next slide. Other key updates, Northern California updates are in this program in terms of progress we're making on bookend projects and other things. We brought into this business plan new connectivity maps that show how high-speed rail connects to other public transportation services in those regions. And we provided more data about partnerships and progress and key benefits on a regional or local basis with the introduction of high-speed rail service. Our program baseline budget, we indicated in the program that the board adopted an additional $2.3 billion in expenditure authority in just December of 2021. And so we've indicated that in the business plan, and we've deferred our larger program baseline budget until after we conclude the budget conversations with the legislature, so we have a fuller understanding of scope and resources available to the program. We also updated our capital cost estimates, which I know was reported a lot in the media, but as we have cleared environmental segments and environmental documents, as this board knows, we identify impacts from the projects in each of these communities that are affected, and we put in place mitigations for those, and those mitigations do come with costs. Things like avoiding the Cesar Chavez National Monument in the Bakersfield to Palmdale stretch, enhanced noise barriers around Tehachapi, design changes to make sure we were limiting our displacements in the Burbank to LA run, tunneling to get next to the new terminal. Those kinds of things certainly bring additional costs. And as we always promised we would do, as those rods complete, we update the cost estimates. And that's what we've done in this business plan as well. Next slide. Again, that's just a reflection of our budget needs as we look at completing the work that's before us. If you include getting an operational run in the Central Valley, finishing our bookend projects north and south, completing all the environmental work, and really getting an operational run on a two-track basis. Our estimate of costs for that is between 22.5 and roughly 24 billion under this program. If we want advanced design work in Northern and Southern California, adds about 600 million additional dollars for this. And so we have a range there of expenditures in our budget, and that goes against an estimated range of budget that again is along that line between 23 and $25 billion. And that's what we propose to use those dollars for. I will just say on the advanced design work in Northern and Southern California, it is most opportune for us to try to do that with new state funding so we can preserve all of our existing budgeted dollars for the work we're looking to do in the Valley and completing the environmental work and getting the bookend projects done first. Next slide. This is just a picture of a chart that's in all of our business plans, and it is in this one. We lay out our cost estimates for the entirety of the phase one system in ranges. The low range is that $72.3 billion figure. The high range is 105.129 for all of the phase one system. We have a base cost estimate of between 87 and 88 billion, and that really will be more determined when we see how things settle out with track and systems and other elements of cost on the Merced to Bakersfield piece. But when those settle, that range will narrow there in the middle. I would say, as I've said here, when we complete RODs, when we complete the environmental work, we do update the cost estimates, and I would expect that as we complete more RODs, we will continue to be at the higher end of the range here, because those RODs, with all the mitigations, we have to account for that, and so the base number will climb as we finish more and more RODs, and so that's just part of getting the work done. And again, I do believe we will end up within the range that's depicted here. Next slide. While this is an expensive project, it's worth noting that this is a study that was first done by the authority, I want to say in 2016. It could have been even earlier than that. We updated it in 2018, and I think again in 2020. But when you consider the mobility and the capacity benefits of the high-speed rail system from San Francisco all the way to LA, even with a high-end cost of $105 billion, for example, versus the cost of expanding highways and airports to provide the same kind of mobility capacity, it's still a relative bargain. It's about half the cost of the expenditures of extending highways, expanding airports, and those issues come without many of the environmental benefits that our program comes with. So it remains a relative bargain compared to traditional transportation investments. Next slide. I mentioned the 2023 project update report, and again, just reminding members, we just did the business plan in 2021. We are updating it here, and we have a project update report due to the legislature in early 23. Again, with that, we'll update our funding strategy as we are informed by the legislative budget discussions that go on, and how or whether the federal government passes the Build Back Better bill. We will update our program budget and schedule as we see the track and systems work come in and finalize all remaining commercial agreements. We have advanced design procurements already for Merced and Bakersfield extensions. We're looking to come back to the board to advance the Central Valley Station designs. And as I mentioned, there's a new ridership and revenue forecast that just got put into place at the end of 21, and we're going to apply that to our program and update those things for the 2023 project update report. And that, of course, will lead us to updating all capital cost estimates, mostly informed by finishing the records of decisions for all the environmental documents. So that's what's in front of us in terms of the next report that we have due publicly into the legislature. Next slide. Just where we are on this process, remember that the draft plan comes out and that kicks off the 60-day public review period. We've had 2 legislative hearings on this draft plan, one in the Assembly and one in the Senate. We had our February 17th meeting where I summarized this plan once, and now today I'm summarizing it again, and we will take public comment after I complete the summary. The end of the 60-day public comment period is April 11th. Our currently scheduled board meeting is April 21st, where the board will then consider action and direction to adopt the business plan and submit it to the legislature by May 1st. So that's the schedule for this business plan. Next slide. Just another way for the public to comment. I know there's folks who are going to comment directly with us here today. There's also a website that's available right there for commenting directly on the program. You can also email the authority at draftbp2022@hsr.ca.gov. We have our mailing address that is also available, a way to do it. And of course, part of today's hearing as well, we'll hear public comment. And so I think that probably concludes it. Next slide.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, of Brian.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Hi, Brian.
Hi.
I know that we have to present this whatever draft business plan before the legislature. But I'm also concerned about the fact that we're in the middle of budget season right now in the legislature. And I was wondering if you have already testified before the budget committees of the state legislature. You have?
Yes,
Okay.
because in the assembly, they did the draft plan oversight committee through their budget subcommittee. And so that was with subcommittee chairman Bloom's committee. Laura Friedman also participated, as did budget chairman Phil Ting. And then on the Senate side, they did a joint committee, which was a committee of their budget committee and the transportation committee did a joint committee on the Senate side. And I testified in that committee last week.
Will there be another opportunity for you to testify? The reason why I'm asking is because, in addition to you, I think that Tom, our chairman, should also be testifying at these hearings to really give, a robust perspective on the part of high-speed rail. That's not only the CEO, but it's also the chairman of the board. And I think most agencies, as you well know, it's usually the chairman of the board that is also testifying. So I would just suggest that it's a darn good idea to bring our chairman. He knows a lot of people in Sacramento, and it's that type of relationship building goes a long way in the state legislature in terms of trying to reach our goals. I mean, Mr. Chairman, Tom, would you be opposed to that in terms of testifying before these committees?
No, of course I will.
I would just say, if I could respond to that I certainly don't make the witness list. The legislature does. And they've invited me to testify. The only other comment I would say is the draft business plan is management's recommendation to the board. And I think before you guys hear all public comment, and before you hear from the legislature directly on this, that you got to be careful having board members get out endorsing the draft prior to the public comment being made available to the board. I'm all for whoever wants to testify, and I'm all for the legislature inviting others to do it. But I would just say I'm responding to legislative requests to testify on a draft that is management's recommendations to the board. And then once you guys take all the testimony and we adopt the final business plan, and we go forward in the budget conversations, I think that's a great time for the chairman and others members.
Right. Let's separate the issues here. To me, there's a difference between the draft business plan, and I understand your perspective. It's a recommendation from management to the board. Okay, I get that. You're right, Brian. I'm talking now. Let's talk now about the 4.2 billion that we would like to get from the assembly. And that's a budget decision. And I think that it would make a strong statement if both you and Tom were present at those type of hearings.
I'm all for it.
Asking for that money.
All for it. They just need to invite us. I'm all for it.
And if they send you an invitation list, you can respectfully pick up the phone and say, you know what? In addition to me, I would also like to include Tom Richards, my chair.
I spent 18 years in the legislature. I kind of know how it works, and I'm happy. I'm happy to extend the invitation.
14 years as a member.
Yeah, I know. I'm
works.
happy to extend the invitation. I just feel like I'm being extremely responsive to what the legislature is asking us for, and I do think it's beneficial for board members to advocate to the legislature as well once we adopt the business plan. So I'm absolutely with you, and I think the budget conversation.
I'm not talking about the business plan. I told you were right on that one. I told you that the board members should not get ahead of it.
I'm agreeing with
about
you.
The 4.2 billion.
And I'm agreeing with you.
Okay.
I'm agreeing with you that we ought to go forward with board members to advocate for the 4.2 billion.
I know.
No question.
And all I am saying is that if you get an invitation list from the legislature that only limits it to you, you can respectfully pick up the phone and say, you know what? We would also like to include our chair.
I could. Happy to
Do you have any objections to this, Mr. Chairman?
No, I appreciate it, Director Escutia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As
And
do I.
we'll work on it. We'll work on a plan there. Thank you very much. Brian, anything else on your report?
No, just happy to answer any
Okay.
questions. about
Any
this.
other questions from board members? Okay, I'm flipping through here to make sure I'm not missing anybody. It looks like we do not. So at this point, the next item of business on our agenda is now to go back to public comment for this agenda item number 2 only, the update to the business plan, and that would be anybody from the public who would like to address the 2022 business plan and comments to the board. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Ramadan, our board secretary, to advise the members of the public again how they can now address us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, all. Welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Board of Directors public meeting. If you wish to provide public comment on agenda item 2, please listen to these instructions for offering your public comment. First, we will run through some important technical aspects of this meeting for offering your public comment. If you are logged into this meeting via the Zoom application, please use the raise your hand feature typically located at the bottom of your screen so that I may call on you to provide your comment. If you're dialing in by phone, pressing #2 will raise your hand and put you into our queue. Speakers will be called in the order that their hand is raised. Once you've been in the queue and your name is called, in the web meeting, please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. On the phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you hear a message that you're being unmuted. Once unmuted, it will be your turn to speak. Please slowly and clearly say and spell your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you represent. After your introduction, each speaker is allotted 2 minutes to provide their comment. I will interject at 1 minute and 45 seconds to provide a 15-second warning. Our core reporter is on the line to record these comments. If they need you to spell or repeat something, they may interject. I will notify you when your time is nearly up. At the end of your comment, we will disable your microphone. However, you are welcome to stay on the line to continue watching or listening to the meeting. If you do not wish to provide comment and simply want to watch the meeting, you can do so by logging on to hsr.ca.gov and looking for the link to our live stream. Mr. Chairman, first up for public comment, we have Frank Quintero. Frank Quintero.
Mr. Quintero, welcome. Mr. Quintero?
Good morning, Chairman Richards.
Yes, good morning and welcome.
Thank you. And thank you, authority members. My name's Frank Quintero, FrankQuintero. I'm with the City of Merced and I serve as its Deputy City Manager. First of all, I've had the pleasure of working and being the project manager for high-speed rail in Merced since 2000. And concerning the 2022 draft business plan, CEO Kelly said it best. We have in Merced a proposal to merge 3 rail providers at 1 multimodal station, which will blend in local providers as well as urban providers to 1 location. Within the plan, page 17 clearly states out the benefits for the San Joaquin Valley as a whole. And for the Central Valley, it is a clear win on why high-speed rail needs to proceed, and the business plan continues to support that. With that, Honorable Chairman and authority members, thank you very much for this opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Quintero. We appreciate all that the City of Merced has done for the project.
You're welcome, sir.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, Consuelo Hernandez. Consuelo Hernandez.
Consuelo Hernandez, welcome.
Thank you. My name, again, Consuelo Hernandez, ConsueloHernandez, representing the City of Sacramento. I'm here today to express our support of the 2022 draft business plan, which advances the governor's proposal and staff recommendations to pursue a Merced, Fresno, Bakersfield, HSR interim operating segment with additional stops at Kings, Tulare, and Madera. The Merced, Fresno, Bakersfield interim operating segment will improve access and connectivity to the City of Sacramento through connections with the ACE and San Joaquin services at a multimodal hub station in downtown Merced. The City of Sacramento also supports the governor's budget proposal for the remaining $4.2 billion in Prop 1A HSR bond funds needed to complete high-speed rail construction in the Central Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, we have Michael Rawson. Michael Rawson.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Chair and Board. My name is Michael Rawson, MICHAELROSSON, and I'm with Sacramento Area Council of Governments. And on behalf of SACOG, I am pleased to express our support for the draft 2022 business plan that moves forward the governor's proposal and the staff recommendation to pursue the Merced Fresno Bakersfield high-speed rail interim operating segment. The improved passenger rail is an essential component of achieving SACOG's and the state's goals to reduce reliance on single occupancy vehicles, improve mobility choices, and reduce harmful air pollutants and greenhouse gas emissions. This critical investment will benefit communities throughout the Northern California mega region and Central Valley. The ACE and San Joaquin's projects will enhance connections for residents and the visitors traveling between Sacramento, the Bay Area, and the fast-growing San Joaquin Valley. SACOG is also supporting our San Joaquin Valley partners to secure additional funding for its expanding ACE and the San Joaquin services between the Sacramento region and Merced. SACOG also supports the governor's budget proposal for the remaining $4.2 billion in Prop 1A bond funds that is needed to complete these high-speed rail construction projects in the Central Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, we have Will Oliver. Will Oliver.
Good morning, Mr. Oliver.
Good morning. I'm with the Fresno Economic Development Corporation, and on behalf of our board of directors and members, we are in support of the 2022 draft business plan as it reaffirms the reasons why this work is so important for many Central Valley communities. As you know, the Central Valley has struggled with above average unemployment, persistent poor air quality, and unabated poverty that surpasses the Appalachians. High-speed rail development in the Central Valley has already put thousands of people to work, aligned hundreds of small businesses opportunities with contracting, and prior to the pandemic, allowed Fresno and the Valley to reach record unemployment levels. The 2022 business plan calls for 171 miles of electrified double track operations connecting Merced, Fresno, and Bakersfield, which will provide much faster, more frequent, and more reliable passenger rail service that is currently available. The success of this early interim service is essential towards implementing the ultimate high-speed rail system between the Bay Area, San Joaquin Valley, and Southern California. In addition, our civic leaders and institutions have made great investments to position the Central Valley as the home of the city of committed hundreds of millions of dollars in planned investment in projects around the Fresno station, much of which hinges on a fully functional station and trains operating throughout the state. It's time to build off the backbone here in the Valley and finish what we started, advance design statewide, and environmentally clear the full 500-mile system from San Francisco to LA. With that, we're in full support of the draft 2022 business plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, we have Dan Levitt. Dan Levitt.
Good morning, Dan.
Hi, Chair Richards, members of the board. Dan Levitt, representing the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, which is the managing agency for the San Joaquin Intercity Rail Service, and the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission, which is the owner-operator of the ACE commuter rail service. I'm speaking in support of the draft 2022 high-speed rail business plan that moves forward the governor's proposal and high-speed rail authority staff recommendations to pursue Merced, Fresno, Bakersfield high-speed rail interim operating segment, providing electrified high-speed rail service to Californians at the earliest time possible. The Merced, Bakersfield high-speed rail interim operating segment with stops at Merced, Madera, Fresno, Kings Tulare, and Bakersfield will improve access and connectivity to other destinations throughout California through better connections with both ACE and San Joaquin services in the north and San Joaquin throughway bus services at Bakersfield for travel to Southern California. Our San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority 2022 draft business plan and San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission's 2021 work program highlight the coordination that we've been doing with the High-Speed Rail Authority and your early train operator to ensure the success of the high-speed rail interim service. Our integrated services plan includes extending ACE to Merced and truncating the San Joaquins at Merced so that both of our services meet with high-speed rail at a multimodal hub station in downtown Merced. We strongly support the governor's budget proposal to provide the remaining $4.2 billion in Prop 1A funding to the authority needed to implement interim service. It's time to deliver true electrified high-speed rail operations to California as promised to the voters. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Dan. For our colleagues, Director Schenk and I recall that now some number of years ago, Dan Levitt used to head up the environmental department for the authority. But go ahead, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, we have Will Ritter. Will Ritter.
Mr. Litter, welcome.
Good morning. My name is Will Ritter, and on behalf of the Tri-Valley San Joaquin Valley Regional Rail Authority, I thank you for the opportunity to provide comment today on the California High-Speed Rail Authority's draft 2022 business plan. The Tri-Valley San Joaquin Valley Regional Rail Authority is responsible for the implementation of the Valley Link rail project that will provide a new 42-mile, 7-station rail connection between the Dublin, Pleasanton, BART station in Alameda County and the North Lathrop Altamont Corridor Express station in San Joaquin County, with all-day service on BART frequencies during peak periods. Valley Link will provide critical statewide rail connectivity, closing a key gap between BART and the state rail system in the Central Valley, linking nearly 500 miles of commuter and intercity rail with more than 130 stations throughout the Northern California megaregion. Consistent with the state rail plan and the California High-Speed Rail Authority draft business plan, Valley Link will expand equitable access by providing the Bay Area and communities in San Joaquin County with integrated connectivity to the Merced Bakersfield high-speed rail interim operating segment and Sacramento through the existing Altamont Commuter Express and future Valley Rail passenger rail services. We support the Merced Bakersfield high-speed rail interim operating segment. We also support the governor's fiscal year 22-23 budget proposal to utilize the remaining $4.2 billion in Prop 1A high-speed rail bond funds for high-speed rail. We look forward to working with your staff to include the identification of the Valley Link rail project in the draft 2022 business plan, and we'll be following up with a letter on these details as part of the formal comment process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ritter.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, we have Dylan Stone. Dylan Stone.
Good morning, Mr. Stone.
Thank you. I'm Dylan Stone with the Madera County Transportation Commission, and we are in strong support of the authority's draft 2022 business plan to implement the Fresno, Madera, Merced, Bakersfield interim service that includes stops in Kings Tulare and here in Madera. As the Madera County Transportation Commission, we are the metropolitan planning organization responsible for preparing our region's long-range transportation plans. And we think this project is a very important aspect of our long-range plan and long-range vision for the Madera region and the San Joaquin Valley. A key goal we have here is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And we believe we do that by shifting more travelers onto other modes. And the commuter rail is one of the key modes that we do want to see travelers from our region shift onto. What the business plan outlines is a much faster, a more frequent and more reliable passenger rail service than what's currently available to travelers in our region. It more than doubles the available service frequency, and it does so as soon as possible. And that's a really important aspect of what's in this plan. And all of this on clean electrically powered trains. We support the authority's draft 2022 business plan, as well as the governor's budget proposal for $4.2 billion in remaining Proposition 1A high-speed rail bond funds, and that they are directed to complete the delivery of this important work here in the Central Valley. Thank you, Chairman Richards and members of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Stone.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, we have Edith Robles. Edith Robles.
Good morning, Ms. Robles.
Good morning, Chair Richards and members of the board. My name is Edith Robles, EDITH ROBLES, and I am with the Stanislaus Council of Governments. So on behalf of StanCog, I'd like to express our support for the draft of California High-Speed Rail Authority's 2022 business plan. This plan does advance the governor's proposal and the high-speed rail's plan to pursue the Merced Fresno Bakersfield high-speed rail interim operating segment with the additional stops at Kings, Tulare, and Madera. The San Joaquin Valley, and more specifically Stanislaus County, does have a unique geographical layout, as many areas in our region are isolated from the more urbanized area, and this does limit our access to both local and regional resources and services. The Merced Fresno Bakersfield interim operating segment will help improve access and connectivity to the Stanislaus County through the connections with the Altamont Corridor Express or A services, and the San Joaquin Amtrak services at the multimodal stations in downtown Merced. SANCOG also supports the governor's budget proposal for the remaining $4.2 billion in Proposition 1A high-speed rail bond funds needed to complete and electrify high-speed rail's interim service between Merced and Bakersfield. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Robles.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, we have Laura Uden. Laura Uden.
Good morning again, Ms. Uden.
Good morning, board members, and thank you for letting me speak again. I'm speaking to you now as the High Speed Rail Business Advisory Council Professional Services Committee Chair. I have yet to finish reading the plan in detail, but I wanted to draw your attention to what I consider a significant gap. The 2022 business plan is supposed to be an update, according to the purpose of the plan, an update on what occurred over the last 10 months affecting our program, progress and opportunities, and management's recommendation to the board on how to address those. My comment is that it doesn't really discuss small business impacts at all. The 2020 business plan at least mentioned achievements and goals sprinkled throughout the plan. Small businesses are required to complete this critical program. For this and future high-speed rail business plans, they should at least summarize the important small business, disadvantaged and disabled veteran business goals, the achievements to date, gaps in the key issues impacting small businesses such as utilization, timely payments, and small business support, and plans to improve those areas. It should also take credit for the achievements to date and discuss the significant impact of this critical program on small businesses throughout the state. We're doing a lot of good out there and we're not really calling it out here. And I think this is an important place to do it because this is all some people are going to read about the program. I'm going to provide these comments as well through the official comment process, but I just wanted to say, please include a discussion on small businesses, achievements and gaps in your approach to addressing those gaps as part of your plan going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Uden.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, we have Marley Smith. Marley Smith.
Thank you, Chairman Richards and members of the board. This is Marley Smith, M-A-R-L-E-E-S-M-I-T-H. I'm the Director of Transportation Policy for the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, which represents over 350 tech and innovation economy employers in the Bay Area and is in support of the draft 2022 business plan. High-speed rail is essential for the development of the local economy and state economy and connects Central Valley residents to well-paying jobs in the Silicon Valley, which greatly expands economic opportunity across the state while radically reducing commutes and transportation costs for workers. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Smith.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, we have Steve Roberts. Steve Roberts.
Good morning, Mr. Roberts.
Good morning, Chair Richards and members of the board. My name is Steve Roberts. I'm president of the Rail Passenger Association of California, an all-volunteer statewide organization of advocates for public improved rail, intercity rail, and commuter rail. Our membership endorses the 2022 California High-Speed Rail Business Plan and urges the board to adopt the plan. And we also are strong supporters of the legislature appropriating the Prop 1A funding to complete this project. Our members ride this rail service and we will be riding it in the future. And we looked anxiously to keep this program underway and moving forward for the benefit of Californians, and specifically the citizens who live in the San Joaquin Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, we have Arnaldo Rodriguez. Arnaldo Rodriguez.
Good afternoon, Mr. Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez.
Arnaldo, if you wish to provide public comment, right now would be your time.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Richards. I apologize for that. I haven't figured out how to operate Zoom.
No problem.
And thank you very much, members of the board. My name is Arnoldo Rodriguez, A-R-N-O-L-D-O, Rodriguez, R-O-D-R-I-G-U-E-Z. I serve as the city manager for the city of Madera. First and foremost, thank you very much for your service to our state and our community. The city of Madera is in support of the draft 2022 business plan to implement the Merced, Fresno, Bakersfield interim service that includes stations at the various locations, specifically in the city of Madera. We believe that this is of the utmost importance, especially in the San Joaquin Valley, knowing that the Central Valley is served or is a key trade corridor for a lot of the produce that's distributed worldwide. We collectively understand, and I think it is widely acknowledged, that we cannot build additional highways to serve the needs of the community. And collectively, we are going to have to begin to identify alternative modes of transportation, specifically rail. With that being said, the city of Madera, along with the county, are very excited to be constructing a new Amtrak station, hopefully high-speed rail station, right outside of the city boundaries that we believe can serve as a model, and not only for high-speed rail, but also the nation for new TOD development. It's adjacent to the state's kind of newest community college, and we feel that we have the proper players in place. We have willing partners to build a high
15 seconds remaining
living environment. And with that, thank you very much, Chair Richards. Can we appreciate it?
And to you too, Mr. Rodriguez. Thanks for joining us.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, we have David Schwagel. David Schwagel.
Mr. Schwagel, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. This is David, D-A-V-I-D, Schwagel, S-C-H-W-E-G-E-L. You know the drill. Spelled like Schweigel, rhymes with bagel, with Phelps, P-H-E-L-P-S, engineering services, just like Michael Phelps, Talkspace Therapy for All. If I am successful at renewing my Washington civil license, and I do plan to call the board later on today to see if I can renew it, given the constraints that I'm facing, I would definitely want to work on Cascadia high-speed rail. Now, I'm noticing in the business plan that you have a slide that talks about the cost of high-speed rail versus the cost of expanding aviation and roadway to have the same carrying capacity. I would highly recommend getting in touch with Roger, R-O-G-E-R, Millar, M-I-L-L-A-R. He is the Washington State Secretary for Transportation. And what he did is he asked his staff at WashDOT to calculate the costs of adding one northbound and one southbound freeway lane through the state of Washington. They came up with a cost of $108 billion. Now, compare that, keep in mind that it's only going to fill up with traffic once it opens. For Cascadia high-speed rail, we're talking a $24 to $42 billion system that will have a comparable carrying capacity of 12 lanes,
15
plus
seconds
airports at either end, plus $355 billion in economic returns. We need to use those sorts of arguments in the business plan to really sell it to the feds and state alike. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwagel.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, we have Blair Beekman. Blair Beekman.
Mr. Beekman, welcome back.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman here to speak on my second item today. And to further speak about, it was nice to hear someone earlier public comment time from Sacramento speak on high-speed rail items. And I'm interested, as I'm saying, in that process. I think it provides to always be considering and thinking about and talking about the LA to Sacramento line as originally planned for the high-speed rail. It creates the ideas of openness and accountability that I think you're talking about at this time. And it's through openness and accountability that creates just better funding practices and easier ways to get funding, and an overall way that we can all better talk about and feel comfortable with the project. I work with, there's a whole new field developing in the future of openness and accountability with the future of surveillance technology and data collection for local communities. It's open public policies and guidelines that really help organize how a city and a community talks about its technology and how it plans and how technology will be placed, and how you can hold it accountable. And you can ask, the public can simply ask now more, what technologies are being placed? And they don't have to feel in fear that we're in a constant state of war in asking. It's a question of our community democracy. It's these sort of good organizational practices that could really help with
15 seconds remaining.
With the questions of future openness and accountability with the CHSR project. And I wish you luck in understanding those concepts. It's those concepts that build our brighter, happier future. Good luck in those efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Beekman.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to briefly go over the instructions for any of the attendees who might have joined after they were provided. For the attendees who wish to provide public comment on agenda item 2, if you are logged into this meeting via the Zoom application, please use the raise your hand feature typically located at the bottom of your screen so that I may call on you to provide your comment. If you're dialing in by phone, pressing #2 will raise your hand and put you into our queue. Speakers will be called in the order that their hand is raised. Once you've been in the queue and your name is called, in the web meeting, please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. On the phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you'll hear a message that you are being unmuted. Mr. Chairman, none of the attendees have motioned to raise their hand, and we have not had any new attendees join after the instructions were provided.
Okay, thank you, Mo. I appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we will now close the second public session, our public comment session, and we'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is the Northern California Regional Update. And to present that this afternoon will be the Northern California Regional Director, Boris Lipkin, and Serge Sanich. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. And good afternoon to you as well. This is really a bit of a presentation that's a preview of things to come in Northern California. I did a pretty comprehensive overview of the many activities we're doing in the region back in October. And so this is our next Northern California regional update. We're going to be focusing specifically on the 2 Northern California environmental documents, one of which is out for public circulation in public now and coming to you next month, and one that's coming up. And because we're focusing on the environmental documents, I have Serge joining me so that if we do get into questions about the environmental process, we can tag team and help answer those. So next slide, please. And so starting with the San Jose to Merced project section, again, this is the one that we're going to focus on most today. This project section is our key connection between the Central Valley and what has already been approved through the Central Valley Y and previous segments that the board has acted on, and to the Bay Area getting up to San Jose and actually ending just north of the station in Santa Clara. In this project section, and you can see the red box on the map, the original set of decisions was really focused more than 10 years ago, and some of these as much as 15 years ago, on the route to get from the Central Valley to the Bay Area, so the Altamont Pass versus the Pacheco Pass. With the board's decision to go with the Pacheco Pass for that route, we started the environmental process on this section back in 2009. We've worked extensively with the communities that we go through and looking at various alternative options before settling on a preferred alternative back in 2019. We published a draft environmental document in 2020, made some revisions to it in 21, and we're here today having published the final environmental document last month. Next slide, please. So in this project section, it's roughly 90 miles, as I mentioned, stretching from Scott Boulevard in Santa Clara through San Jose and South Santa Clara County before turning east across the Pacheco Pass and joining the Central Valley Y. We have 4 alternatives that we studied in the draft and final environmental documents. The preferred alternative is the purple line, alternative 4, which extends the blended system and follows the existing rail corridor from San Jose to Gilroy before turning east on the dedicated line that converges around Casa de Fruta, if you're familiar with driving on 152, that's a big landmark there, and going through to Carlucci Road in Merced County. Next slide, please. A few refinements that we made between in the preferred alternative, just to highlight things that have evolved, continued to evolve since the board identified the preferred alternative back in 2019. We made some changes on the design of the Guadalupe River Bridge, which is just south of Diridon Station, to make sure that we're not affecting the 100-year floodplain there as we build through that area. And then we've also incorporated two design variants, one around Diridon Station to increase the speed of the curves going in and out of the station from 15 to 40 miles an hour, and some very minor modifications to the design of the tunnels in Pacheco Pass to increase the speed there from 200 to 220 miles an hour. And both of those, all of those have been incorporated in the final EIR-EIS. Next slide, please. Just to cover some of the key kind of statistics for the section, it's as I mentioned, almost 90 miles. About 15 miles of that is on viaduct, and another 15 miles is in two tunnel sections. One is a 1.5 mile tunnel, which we call Tunnel 1, and then Tunnel 2 is a 13.5 mile tunnel, which is the longest proposed tunnel in the entire system. We have about 30 miles of the systems at grade, and various other portions are on embankment, and a few miles of a little bit of trench. We also have a variety of water crossings and roadway crossings throughout the section, and we do have various interactions with roads, some which we realign, some which we close, again depending on the exact location and design of the system. Next slide, please. So to give a sense, again, and the board had identified the preferred alternative back in 2019, and this was one of the summaries that we used at that time in terms of the comparison between the alternatives. And so with the preferred alternative, and really the difference being that we're using the existing rail corridor between San Jose and Gilroy, and so we're not having to build a whole new dedicated alignment, which would impact a lot more of the communities. So we have in the preferred alternative, using the existing corridor, we have the fewest displacements. We have the fewest impacts on wetlands and habitats. Again, you know, when you're building on an existing rail line, you're not building on other things. We have the best access to transit and connecting services, both in Gilroy and in San Jose. The fewest visual impacts and fewest impacts to parks along the way, which is very important on our federal regulatory side of things. The lowest capital cost, and from really one of the key differentiators for this alternative is it allows for the extension of electrified Caltrain service to Gilroy, which has been a long time goal for those communities, as well as for Caltrain as part of their long range vision. Is really right now we're helping them electrify the line from San Jose to San Francisco. But with this preferred alternative, they would be able to completely replace their diesel fleet and move to fully electrified service, increasing the service in the corridor from what they are able to operate today, and obviously reduce emissions and provide other benefits to the communities, including ones in between our stations in San Jose and Gilroy. Next slide, please. So just to give, again, a quick snapshot of the environmental process, and we'll be coming back with a lot more on this next month. So this is, again, just skimming the surface on some of these things, but we will have a lot more to say in April when we actually ask for your approval. We had 2 comment periods on this project section. One was back in 2020, when we published the draft environmental document. We received almost 750 submissions. Submissions being letters or public comment that people gave at our hearings, for example. When we delimited those into individual comments that we then respond to, we got almost 5,000 comments in total. About 500 of the submissions were a form letter that we received. When we published the revised and supplemental draft EIR-EIS in 2021, that was really focused on some regulatory changes around the treatment of endangered species, including mountain lion and monarch butterfly, as well as noise and light mitigation for wildlife. We received 16 submissions and 226 comments on that one. And of course, and our work since that time has been responding to every comment and then addressing the issues that they've raised. Next slide, please. And this is just meant to try to give us at least a sense of where the 5,000 comments were focused on. And so we had a variety of topics that really, bubbled up, and we'll be talking about this more, but everything from specific alternatives. There was a big focus on displacements, on wildlife habitat and movement, certainly on traffic and cultural resources, and of course, environmental justice. And so in response to the comments that we received, we either modified or added additional analyses in the final environmental document. We also modified or added additional mitigations to address the issues that were raised. And of course, we will have a lot more to say about this next month, and as we brief the board on the way to asking for your approval. Next slide, please. And just again, the little bit of preview of what we'll be talking about in April. We'll cover in a lot more depth the history of the alternatives development. I gave just sort of a couple of bookends of where we started in terms of Altamont versus Pacheco and where we landed with the final EIR, but there's a whole story in between there. We'll provide an overview of the stakeholder engagement that we've had over the many years, over 13 years of developing this project section. We'll talk about the key project effects and mitigation measures. We'll focus on station planning in both San Jose and Gilroy and the work that we're doing with those communities. We have a variety of important wildlife areas in this project section, so we'll cover wildlife movement and impacts and the mitigations that we're proposing there, as well as environmental justice and other key topics from the final environmental document. So I think that's, and then one more slide, I think, on this part. So, and again, this is sort of our standard procedure. We'll have a 2-day board meeting in April where we'll we'll first give our presentation. During day 1, we will take public comment on the final, and for the board's consideration, the board will you will have an opportunity to ask us to come back and clarify anything on day 2, and then you'll be asked to consider whether to certify the final environmental document as the CEQA lead agency, and then approve the preferred alternative and related CEQA decision documents, and direct the CEO to issue the record of decision under the authority's NEPA assignment. So those will be the actions in front of you next month. And then I think I have just 2 quick slides to cover the San Francisco to San Jose project section and update. And this one's a little bit of a further look ahead. This one, as we're wrapping up San Jose to Merced, we're turning our attention towards finalizing San Francisco, San Jose. And so we expect this one in the coming months. But this project section is a little bit unique, at least in Northern California, where we are both already investing in this corridor through the electrification project. And really what we're studying is, when we're using the Caltrain corridor, what are the needed improvements on top of the electrification project in order to have high-speed rail service here. So we have 3 stations that we're looking at in San Francisco and Millbrae and San Jose in this project section. We have 2 alternatives that differentiate between the location of the light maintenance facility, either on the east or west side of the tracks in Brisbane. The preferred alternative has that on the east, alternative A. We also looked at an option that had a passing track and one that didn't in the middle of the corridor between San Mateo and Redwood City. Again, the preferred alternative was the one without an additional passing track based on our operational analysis for the blended system with Caltrain. And then we had various options for the approach into Diridon Station. That's primarily driven by the decisions ultimately made in San Jose to Merced there, because those need to obviously tie in together as the intersection point. We also had an additional design variant that we looked at around the Millbrae station, and we'll be covering that in more detail as we get to this one as it comes up in its order.
Excuse me, Boris, on Millbrae, I would be very interested in being kept abreast of that. I have been approached by several council members of Millbrae, and they're very concerned that their opinions, their thought process as to what's the best location for the station is not being taken into consideration.
Yeah, we've definitely had a lot of engagement with the city, and I'd be happy to set up a briefing with you to give you the background on how that's going and where we're at with them, if that would be of interest.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Lipkin?
Last slide, I promise. I'm almost done. Just a similar overview kind of the process here. We published our draft environmental document back in 2020. We came back with a revised and supplemental draft EIR last year. That one was focused on the monarch butterfly. We don't have mountain lions on the peninsula, or at least mountain lion habitat, and as well as the Millbrae design variant that I mentioned. And then we're looking to publish the final EIR, EIS here in late spring, so late May or into June, and then looking to bring that one to the board in the summer, so probably July or August as we are finishing that one off. So that's the quick swing around the two project sections in Northern California. And again, we'll have a lot more next month on San Jose and Merced, and a lot more on San Francisco, San Jose in the coming months. So thank you. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Lipkin? Seeing none, then Boris, thank you. We'll look forward to seeing you in a month or so. With that, members of the colleagues, we will now move on to agenda item number 4, which is CEO report. Brian Kelly, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be brief. There's only a couple of items to cover in this CEO report this month. If we can pull up the PowerPoint. I'm going to cover 3 items in this. There you go. 3 items in this report. One is an update on our most recent cap and trade auction from earlier this month, an update on our future board meetings, which will be different than what we've done in recent months. And then there's a brief video at the end, just a couple minutes long, which is our spring construction update, which I'm happy to share with the board and the public. So let's go on to the first slide, please. This slide just depicts where cap and trade has been, and particularly the last 4 auctions. On the right side of this slide is what I call your attention to. These have been the best. If you annualize the 4 auctions, quarterly auctions, it's been the best year in the history of the program for cap and trade funds for high-speed rail. That's an annualized figure of $1.047 billion from cap and trade in just 4 auctions. The last one in February was just under 244 million. And you see we had a record high the month before that, and 2 very strong auctions just prior to that as well. So you could see really, if you start in the middle where that gold line is, you could see the stabilization as we come out of COVID and how the market is stabilizing, and the auctions are very robust. The primary driver of the higher auction proceeds is auction settlement prices significantly above what they call the reserve price. In February, that auction settlement price was $29.15 per allowance versus a reserve price of $19.70. So it just shows that the allowances are in high demand. And I think as long as we've got strong policies nationally and in the state on moving forward on strong greenhouse gas reduction strategies, this will be continue to be a vibrant program. The final 22 business plan will also be updated to include the February auction in the final draft. Next slide. Moving from cap and trade, just want to remind the board members or indicate that beginning next month in April, we go back to the sort of pre-COVID protocols and practices for our monthly meetings. So the upcoming April meeting is proposed to be a 2-day board meeting. It's currently scheduled April 20th and April 21st. Again, it's in person at what's called the East End Complex, 1500 Capitol Avenue, the Department of Healthcare Services here in Sacramento. We have met there before in their nice auditorium. It's a really good facility for us. And again, the expected action items coming up are the question of adopting the 22 business plan, and as Boris just outlined, the EIR, EIS for the San Jose and Merced sections. But again, we're getting back to in-person meetings. Next slide.
Brian, before you
Yes.
move on, since it's a 2-day meeting and it's in person, can we at least start the second day earlier than 11? Like 9 or.
Let us look at that. I know that the thing that we just have to plan for is to make sure that the environmental team has sufficient time to respond to the comments the day before. And so I just want to make sure that they've got sufficient time. I'll go back and look at that, and we'll try to do it as early as we can on the second day.
Yeah, because without high-speed rail, there are very limited flights back.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Just a note, getting back to the future in-person meetings, I know that some board members, some directors may wish to call in. Of course, we want to encourage as much in person as possible at this point. But however, I understand that some may still want to call in or do it remotely, and I just want to remind folks of sort of the pre-COVID rules for that. The authority must include a teleconference location for board members not participating in person on the agenda. Those locations must be accessible to the public, so it's not the same as being able to do it from, say, your home. It's got to be in a place where the public can be accessible. Ensure the equipment is sufficient. We have to post an agenda at those teleconference locations. And if any member of the public attends at the teleconference location, they must be able to address the governing body in the same manner as those attending in person. All votes taken at the meetings with teleconference must be with a roll call vote. So again, we're not excluding any options that were not provided before, but we do have to go back to those prior rules for how we do it. I want to make sure the members are all aware of that. Okay. Next slide. This is just a brief video for the members, and then this will conclude the CEO report for this month. And it's just a simple update on our what we call our spring construction update. We try to put these out quarterly, and this is the latest. So I think with that, I'll ask the team to run the video.
Let's start in construction package 1. At the Avenue 15.5 grade separation in Madera County, the construction of the substructure is complete. Concrete has been placed at the east abutment while the abutment to the west is taking shape. Between downtown and Fresno's Chinatown, work continues on the Tulare Street underpass. Both tracks of the Union Pacific Railroad have been cut over to the shoe fly, a temporary track built for construction of the underpass. And to the west, you can also see progress at the G Street Bridge, where crews have placed concrete for the bridge deck that will take traffic over the underpass. Concrete has been placed to form 3 of the 4 concrete arches at the Cedar Viaduct over State Route 99. And just to the south, MSE walls continue to go up, bringing the Cedar Viaduct and Muscat Avenue Viaduct together. In February, in Construction Package 2-3, the authority celebrated the completion of the South Avenue grade separation. At Adams Avenue, 16 concrete precast girders for the superstructure of the grade separation have been placed. Next up, the setting of precast concrete panels to form the deck of the structure. Crews at the Conejo Viaduct are working late nights and weekends to set 248 precast concrete girders for the pergola section of the structure. As of March 1st, 33 girders that span nearly 124 feet long and weigh more than 150,000 pounds each have been placed. 12 precast concrete girders will be installed at the Dover Avenue overcrossing in Kings County this spring. When complete, the overcrossing will stretch nearly 227 feet long. And in Tulare County, more than 100 cast-in drilled holes, or CIDH holes, have been completed for the foundation of the Tule River Viaduct. 32 of the 75 columns needed for the pergola section are also now complete. 2022 kicked off in Construction Package 4 with 15 precast concrete girders being installed at the McCombs Road grade separation in Kern County. 360 precast concrete deck panels will be installed to form the top of the superstructure. Carpenters and ironworkers continued work on the remaining edge girder sections of the Wasco Viaduct. Post-tensioning activities are now underway to reinforce the concrete before the last 4 girders are installed on the south side of the pergola structure. And at the Kimberlina Viaduct, nearly 560 cubic yards of concrete was poured to form the lower deck of the structure. Ironworkers will continue working on the stem walls by continuing to tie rebar, and crews will place concrete throughout the spring.
You with us, Brian?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, that concludes my CEO report. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions for Brian?
I actually have a question.
Yes, Mark, please.
Going back to the business plan and the question or the comment by Ms. Udom during the comment period. Could you respond to that, Brian?
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah.
appropriate to put into the business plan an impact on?
I appreciate the question, Director Pena. I actually think her comments were very well advised. And I think we should absolutely put in some elements in the business plan of our small business goals and participation. Absolutely. And so I think, and not only that, but also the things we're working through with small business groups. So I think her comments were on point.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Brian?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I do have one question for Brian.
Yes,
Brian, you had mentioned your first report that in July, we should be closing the bids or receiving the bids on the tracking.
Tracking systems, yes.
Yeah. Could you give a little more detail on that in terms of what, how many applicants we have at this point? And
sure.
What that process will be, and then from July forward, then what will be the plan?
Yes, as you know, this has been a long procurement, mostly affected by really two things: affected by the COVID pandemic and affected by, in part, the legislature's want for us to slow down on the tracking systems contract. We've tried to be responsive to both. So initially, we had 3 bidders on this contract. At the height of the COVID, one of the bidders, we think due to market risks at the time COVID first struck, dropped out. We have 2 remaining bidders left on this program. And the bids are due in for the tracking systems in July. Once those are in, we will update the board on what those look like. And I think we're not intending to come back to the board for any award of those until October. But I would also say that as those come in, I expect there will be additional conversation with policymakers and folks in the legislature about what those bids look like, what they are, and before we come back to the board for any final action. But that's where it stands right now. We're looking at a July bid date and roughly an October award date if we move forward.
Okay, and they're bidding on a single and a dual track?
They are bidding on both. Yes, we want to see pricing for both.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for our CEO? Yes, Lynn?
Yeah, Brian, it's been a long time since I've been up in the area, COVID.
Yeah.
And I, for one, would love to get a tour if it doesn't impact, too much on staff.
Yeah, you mean on that construction site?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, we'll make that work anytime.
If we could arrange that, maybe there are others who want to join, but as I say, it's been too long since I've been up there.
Why don't we put out at the staff level, why don't we put out an invite to board members? We got to be mindful of making sure we don't have a quorum, but
right.
we could do it in sections, but I'd love to bring all board members out at some point to see the construction sites. Absolutely.
I think it's important that we see it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Any other questions? All right, Brian, thank you. We'll move on.
You, Chairman.
Yes, okay. Let me just touch on item number 5 on the F&A, Finance and Audit Committee report this morning. I'm sensitive to the fact that we've also got a closed session after this, so I'll go as quickly as possible. Under accounts payable and aging, 2 things I'd say. One, the authority has not had a late payment now for 5 years, as was pointed out by our CFO today, compared to where we were when we were many years ago. That's pretty astounding. In terms of disputed invoices, about the same as last month, just slightly above 96 million. In terms of invoices paid, they were up by about 24 million to 111 million. This was for the month of January. And the value of invoices in process down about $1 million to $74 million. Looking at our cash management, our cash balances, this again at the end of January, 1.67 billion. That was down about 130 million from the month before. Brian has already talked about cap and trade. I would only let you know that that 1.67 does not incorporate the amount that we expect to have placed in our account for both the November and February cap and trade sales. And with that in mind, that would increase our bank account by about 567 million for the receipts from those two sales. On our capital outlay budget, I think I mentioned last month, the expectation in terms of the budget is at about for this, that would be for the 21-22 fiscal year, about 1.7 billion. Expended through January is 703 million. That was excuse me, that was about 41.3% of the expected expenditure for the fiscal year, with about 58% of the fiscal year having passed. Our small business utilization rate was up 0.1% to 23.6%. That's been steadily going up at roughly that rate for the last several months. We had a contingency drawdown of about $244 million. That was not spent, but it was a drawdown making allocation for that contingency amount. It included primarily a TIA of about 122 million. Golden State Boulevard in Fresno, $47 million, and a contract extension of 27 million. With regards to the Central Valley status report, we averaged in January 802 workers per day on our construction sites. In terms of construction project, our process structures under construction or completed remained at 66 out of a total of 93 that will be necessary for the completion of the 119 miles. The guideway of 119 miles, the amount under construction or completed increased by 1 mile to 87 miles. And right of way, 8 parcels were delivered in January. That took us to 249 parcels with a need of, or excuse me, 2,049, if I didn't say that, with a need of 2,286. So we're about 90% on our right-of-way delivery. And with that, I'll conclude that. Are there any questions on that? If there are none, we will now, for the people from the public, you will note, if you've looked at our agenda, we do have a closed session, and we'll move to closed session now. I don't expect this to be all that long. I'm going to guess maybe around 30 minutes, after which time I'll come back and let you know if there's anything to report from the board, and we'll try to keep that at about 30 minutes. So with that, thank you all for joining us, and a quick shout out to all of our IT people who make this possible every month, and to our board secretary for the phenomenal jobs that all of you do, along with, of course, all the other people behind the scenes who are making this project happen. Thank you all, both staff and management. With that, we will now go to closed session, and we'll be back, or I will be back hopefully in about 30 minutes. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the California High-Speed Rail Authority board meeting for March 17th. As you who have been with us know that we moved to closed session. Closed session has been finished by the board, and I am back to report to you that there is nothing to report from today's meeting. So I apologize that it took a bit more than 30 minutes that I thought it would take. But with all of that, thank you for being with us, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month. And that is a 2-day meeting having to do with environmental authorization and approvals. So with that, thank you again for joining us. Be safe, all the best, and this meeting is now adjourned.